Okay, I'm going to open up the webinar and others will catch up to us as they sign on. Good morning and welcome to today's webinar on creating a successful exit strategy. My name is Jim Danhauser. I'm a volunteer mentor with SCORE, and I have just a couple of introductory items I want to cover before turning things over to our facilitator for today, my colleague Bob Matterstock. You see listed on this slide the organizations that provide assistance to the Cape Cod and Islands chapter of SCORE in presenting this webinar. We're supported by the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce and the various chambers of commerce located on towns throughout Cape Cod and the islands, as well as by the Community Development Partnership located out in Eastham. And as always, we're very grateful to these organizations for their ongoing support of our educational programming. For those of you who are not familiar with SCORE, we are a fully volunteer nonprofit organization and a resource partner of the U.S. Small Business Administration. SCORE's mission is to foster vibrant small business communities through education and mentoring. We've been pursuing this mission since our founding in 1964 through educational opportunities like this webinar and by providing mentoring assistance to people who are in business or who are thinking about starting a business. We benefit from having over 50 volunteer mentors and subject matter experts here at our Cape Cod and Islands chapter of SCORE, people with a broad array of differing business experience and expertise, all of whom stand ready to provide mentoring assistance to you in connection with your business activities. So if you'd like to avail yourself of those services, all of which are completely free and absolutely confidential, you could call the SCORE office at 508-775-4884 or go online at www.capecod.score.org. Click on the Find a Mentor tab to get started. I also know that many of you on today's webinar come from geographic areas covered by other SCORE chapters in our district, a district that covers all of Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Each of those chapters similarly has a significant number of mentors and subject matter experts ready to provide assistance to you. You see the websites for those chapters listed on this slide. You can go to the appropriate website, click on the Find a Mentor tab, and arrange to have mentoring provided to you. If you'd like, you could enter your name, geographic area, and email address in the chat, and I will get that information to the appropriate chapter to go ahead and get you started. You also see a reference here to Coastal Community Capital. Coastal is a lending organization based here on Cape Cod, which is licensed to do business throughout the state of Massachusetts. We at the Cape Cod and Islands chapter of SCORE do a significant amount of work with Coastal, both in helping their clients to better flesh out their business plans and in helping our clients to better understand the scope of financing that may be available to them. So if you are thinking about checking out financing opportunities for your business, we'd encourage you to reach out to Coastal at those contact numbers. Finally, just a quick word about today's procedures. All participants other than myself and Bob have been muted. If you have any questions or comments, I ask that you enter them into the Q&A feature. I'm going to keep track of those as they come in and relay them to Bob so that he can take them on as they relate to the material that he's just covering. And it's just easier for me to do that if I don't have to toggle back and forth between the Q&A and the chat. We will answer as many questions as we possibly can during the course of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded. We will send a link to the recording to everyone who registered for the webinar as soon as it's available from the Zoom's process, and that usually takes a day or two. And we will launch a poll just before the conclusion of today's session. It's just seeking information to make sure that our educational efforts meet the needs of our business community. And so with that, I will turn things over to my colleague, Bob Matterstock. Bob, take it away.
Thank you, Jim. Let me get myself set up here. Okay. As Jim mentioned, we're talking today about creating a successful exit strategy for yourself and your business. I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I spent over 30 years as a financial advisor to small business owners and their families. A major portion of my business was to working with physicians in Connecticut as they transition from solo practices to larger practices. I'm known as a certified financial planner. I've written 4 books on intergenerational planning, one of which might be of interest to you. It's called Passing the Torch: Critical Conversations with Your Adult Children. It's a book about what you need to do to make sure your adult children know what's going on and how you are progressing in what you're doing. I sold my business in 2009, and I learned a great deal from that experience, and I'll share some of that with you today as part of our program. I would consider 4 key considerations in starting an exit strategy. First of all, start early. Don't expect that in 12 months, you're going to have a plan worked out and with the buyer all set up. It took me more than 2 years to get my program set up and make sure I had everything in place to meet the needs of my potential clients. So start early. Don't waste time once you're getting interested. Have a proper valuation of your business done. Do a net worth statement of your business and a cash flow statement so that you'll have those available for the appropriate people who want to work with you. And probably most important is to consider you and your family's long-term personal goals after you exit the business. And what do you plan to do once you sell this business? Or perhaps you're not going to sell it completely, but only parts of it. So you have to think about what those goals are, because that's what the business is going to do, is going to enter into your personal goals. And fourth, have a contingency plan to deal with the situation if your plan is interrupted for any reason. I say that because that's exactly what happened to me. I originally set up my sale to the accounting firm that I had been working with, and they were all set to buy my practice. And the key person in the firm was going to take over my business. But shortly after the transition, I got a call from the accounting firm, and they said, guess what? Your partner has left the firm and he's taken all the clients with him. So there went my fabulous business buyout plan. But I was able to renegotiate with my former partner and make it work. But those things happen. So make sure you have a contingency plan if your original plan does not work out. There's 5 key steps to plan your exit, and we'll talk about each one of these. First of all, it's to set a target date. Secondly, is to get feedback on what your plan is. Third is to create the plan itself. Fourth is to publish the plan. And fifth is to implement the plan. You need to complete all 5 of these steps to make sure your exit works. And let's start talking about each one of those. So first of all, is to determine a target date for your role change. When is it that you want this to occur? In my case, it was my age 65. So I started 3 years earlier to set things up so that they would work. But you need to establish a deadline for your sale and work backwards from that. So you set the date. Let's say the date is January 1, 2024. What are the things that you need to do prior to that date to make sure everything's in place, and set dates for those to occur along the way so that you establish a specific target date and you can change your role as you progress. Of course, things may change and that original target date may not work out. So you may have to make adjustments. And then ask yourself, what is your new role going to be? Are you strictly going to be out of the business? Are you selling a portion of the business? Are you going to maintain an interest with your family in the business? but what will your role be? How do you want your role to change when you sell your business? So that's step number one, deciding on a target date. Step number two is discuss the plan with others who are affected. Now, you don't want it widely disseminated that you're interested in selling your business, but those who are close to you, if you have partners, if you have family members who are in the business, and if you have key employees, you want them to understand what you're doing so they're not surprised and shocked by what happens. One of the things I found very interesting and very helpful is to set up a family meeting with a facilitator who had no involvement with the business. And I did that for my family and had a family meeting with, not necessarily a family meeting, but a meeting with my close partners and key employees. So they could ask a number of questions about what was happening, what I intended to do, so no one was surprised. A family meeting is a very useful tool to keep everyone intact and on board.
Bob, just a
Yes.
quick question.
Uh-huh.
Who are the kinds of people that can serve that facilitator role?
Well, that's a very good question. There are specific organizations that are mediation firms. Right here on Cape Cod, there's a firm called Cape Mediation, and they specifically do mediation services for families and businesses here on the Cape. I formerly went through their training. They have a 30-hour training, and they have a full team of mediators. It's capemediation.org that can help you with your plan. And it's worthwhile talking to them, first of all, to see how you would structure that meeting and who you'd like to go to the meeting. So it's a very good organization. They've been in place for a number of years, and they're right in Hyannis.
And I assume that in other markets, you would find similar kinds of organizations.
Yes, yes. I mean, there are organizations out of Boston, specific mediation firms in Boston that do the same thing as the organization here on the Cape, because it's a wide and growing area. The area of mediation is becoming increasingly valuable because of all the difficulties we have in making decisions, working together. But the mediator's role strictly is to maintain objective situation and not favor either party in the program. So his or her job is to listen and help you as an organization come up with the right answers. The facilitator's job is not to tell you what to do. So you don't expect them to come in and say, okay, here's what you need to do to get this going. You need to work with your team through the facilitator to accomplish what you need to accomplish. It's a very valuable exercise, and you might want to consider doing that before you get seriously involved in a sale of your business. So that's number two, is gaining feedback on your plan. Those people who are close to you, what do they think about what you are trying to do? Does it make sense? Are you expanding too fast? Are you making too many changes? And ask for their feedback so that you know what you can do. That's step number two. Step number three is to actually create the plan. Usually, in most cases, it entails a change in ownership of the business. There are several alternatives to deciding which path to take, and I'll take a look at each one of them. It's a sale of the business, and we'll look at the options of sale. There's mergers with another firm, and for larger businesses, there's going public. So let's take a look at these options. For the sale of business, there are really four choices that you have. First is to sell to children or other family members. That may be done in a number of different ways. You could take back a paper and sell it to a child or children, and they can pay you off over time. Or you can gift stock to them. Or there's another program that I did with a client called a family partnership, where all the family members become part of a partnership, and those with the most stock have the greatest value in the partnership. And those family partnerships are changing a stock over a period of time from parents to their children. So that's number one. And you want to determine if in fact your children are interested in your business. Do they want to be part of your business? In many cases, they don't want. I mean, I asked my daughter, who is working in my business was in Connecticut, and she was in New York City. And I said, listen, Steph, are you interested in taking over my business? And she said to me, what? Live in Connecticut? No way. I don't want to do that. I don't want to live there. So it didn't work for her. But there are a number of businesses, especially in my field, in the financial services business, that family members take on a new role and take over the business from their parents. So selling to your children is probably one of the first things you want to consider as an option. The second option is the sale to employees. There are a number of different ways to do that. One of the ways is a employee stock ownership plan. It's a rather complicated situation, but over time, your employees accumulate stock in your business, and that can either be done with annual bonuses or yearly programs so that they build up an interest in the business over time. That's called an employee stock ownership plan. And you may find that there are one or two key employees in your business who are working very hard and have worked with you a long time, who have some interest in working with you to take over the business. I've seen that happen very often, where you have an experienced employee who understands the business extensively and is interested in buying it from you, so that you can work out the arrangements either through a sale with you take back paper, or through organizations like Coastal that we looked at earlier today. But oftentimes selling to an employee is maybe the best way to go because they really understand your business. The third option is selling to a strategic buyer. That's someone who wants to improve their situation in the marketplace by buying your business. And an example of that might be eBay, who bought PayPal. And by buying PayPal, they extended the capability for people to be able to buy things online without using their credit cards through PayPal. Another one is Morgan Stanley and E-Trade. They both helped each other. Those firms both were important in helping each other achieve their results. So a strategic buyer might be someone who has a strong interest in expanding their business into your field. Last is the sale to a financial buyer. This is traditionally strictly a financial arrangement. They look at your business and see, well, here's the potential to make significant capital and significant gains. And they buy your business strictly to become financially successful and become better capitalized. So that's the fourth option. So those are really the four options that you have for an actual sale of your business: selling to your children, your employees, a strategic buyer, or a financial buyer. There's two other options. One is called a merger. That's generally if you're not big enough to be able to facilitate the other types of options, merging with another practice or another firm might be the best success for you. I've seen many people in my financial services business merge their practice with someone else so that both firms gain from a larger focus and a larger capability by merging their businesses together. The other option is to go public. Now, very few of us are going to be able to do that. It generally requires an investment of several $1 million, in many cases up to $100 million to go public. You need to arrange it through a brokerage firm. The brokerage firm will go out into the marketplace and find potential buyers for you, and you create a stock that's publicly traded for potential buyers. So those are other exit options in addition to the sale of your business.
Bob, if you're thinking about trying to sell your business and you don't have your children or your employees that are viable buyers, how do you go about finding strategic buyers and or financial buyers?
Well, I think as far as strategic buyers go, you want to look in your industry and who are firms that have similar situations to yours in your industry who might gain or benefit by your consolidating with them. That is an excellent way to find an option through another firm. That's what we call strategic work. In my business in financial planning, there were, and there still are, a number of firms that are growing dramatically by buying small practices in their area. And by doing that, they increase their size dramatically and have a much larger presence. So look for organizations that have some connection with your business, not necessarily in the same business, but would benefit by having a firm like yours on as part of their overall business. And I mentioned two of those was eBay and PayPal. Both of those were totally different businesses, but they benefited from working together. So look at your business and say, okay, what other businesses? Maybe it's some of your suppliers. Do your suppliers have a relationship with you that may want to purchase your business? Because if you're doing well and you're successful, there's going to be a lot of interest. Strategic buyers are those who, financial buyers are those who are looking strictly at the bottom line. So if you're producing substantial income in your business and they are interested in that strictly because investing $1, they'll prove to have excellent results. And again, in the financial services business, they've been growing dramatically. Firms have been growing dramatically in the last 10 years and are very profitable because in the financial services business, there's not a lot of things they have to produce. It's mainly getting to know clients and bringing clients in. And by increasing their financial base, by bringing more clients and more firms, they make more money. So there are firms that are out there looking to purchase other firms to gain benefit from their bottom line. So look at your bottom line and say, okay, who are the key firms that I can work with that may produce results working with me that would benefit them and benefit myself. And that's how you start to look at and start to do your homework related to other firms who are similar to yours that might look for your help. But publishing the plan is important. That's step number 4, is you want to bring it out to the public so that people know what your plan is. And that starts out with your key management team, and your family members. They need to know exactly what you're doing. Because if you keep it a secret from them and they're not aware of what's going on, it's going to really create problems for you. Because these people have, in many cases, been working with you a long time, and you don't want to subvert their interests. You want to make it clear to them what you are doing and get their feedback. You want to communicate with them and get their feedback on the program. And their management and your family must know your long-term goals. And here's where you start to think about, okay, what is my target date? What is the date that I want to complete this sale? And what are the interim goals that I need to do to make that happen? In my case, it was working with other advisors in my firm to get to know my clients. And that took over 1.5 years for them to get to know my clients so that I would feel comfortable and my clients would feel comfortable transferring over to these other people. And again, it's important for your family to know, because your situation, it may change dramatically once you sell your business. And what will your plans be once you do that? Is there going to be any family members involved in the business going forward? Or is it going to be employees that you've had? Or is it going to be strictly a financial sale or a strategic sale? That's the fourth step. The fifth and last step is to actually implement the plan.
Bob, we had a couple more questions that
Sure.
came in.
Uh-huh.
One person asks, how would you reach out to another business to see if they want to buy your business? I think, underlying that is the concern that if word gets out that you're selling your business, does it hurt you? And how
Right.
do you accomplish all of that?
Yeah, I think that's very true. You don't want to put everything out on the table initially. You want to do some homework on your own. And I'd suggest you identify some potential firms that you think would have an interest in your firm and meet with them privately and have a private conversation with them and say, I'm interested in changing my role in the business. Would you have any interest in pursuing that? So that's an informal step forward that you use. You can often use your own professional advisors. If you have a CPA and or an attorney, talk to them to see who they know in similar fields that they've worked with that can help you. Those are people that they may already have a relationship with, and they can make it simpler to make that combination. But it's on an informal basis initially. You don't want it to go out publicly. You want to be informal and make a list of 3 or 4 potential buyers that you think might be interested in your business and might have the financial wherewithal to step forward. And again, your financial advisor, your attorney, or your CPA may have good information for you as to how to do that. So that's really, yes, go ahead.
A couple more questions, as long as we're at it. What approach should you take if you've created a unique brand?
A unique, I'm sorry, I missed you there.
A unique brand.
Well, there's a perfect example using the PayPal example. PayPal has a unique brand, and they can provide a unique service to eBay by providing that to the clients of eBay. Is your program, your brand, something that can coordinate with other firms to make them successful? And having a unique brand is really helpful to you because it gives you a better situation out in the open because other people recognize that brand and what it means. But you want to find firms that can relate to that your brand and can benefit from using your brand in their own firms, in their own situations. So it's really finding that connection with another firm. And again, that's finding a strategic partner that can utilize your services that you have to be able to benefit them. And you want to reach out to, first of all, to your own advisors and ask them, first of all, how they can help you find those people. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, actually, we do have a couple more. There are 2 related questions.
Okay.
What do you do if the client that you're introducing to your new partner decides to leave your business? The value of your company will be less.
Right.
Or when do you introduce your clients to the new partner? Before you sold the company or after or during the due diligence?
That's a very important question. Certainly the buyer is going to have in their agreement, if a certain number of your clients leave when the business is sold, that is going to kill the deal. So they want to make sure that a certain amount of income continues to the business and a certain number of clients continue. So you want to make sure that your clients, and what I did is, again, meet with my clients individually and discuss with them what my plans were and get their feedback. And then once I had identified who the potential buyer was, I had my client meet with that potential buyer and see if there was any way they could work together. Because you want to know early on if you're going to have any difficulty with your clients, because that's the value of your business, are your clients. And you don't want to lose them in the process of selling. So as I did, I spent 1.5 years meeting with each of my clients and in reviewing with them what my plans were before I actually made the move and made the sale. So I wanted to know how they felt and what they needed to know and what they were concerned about. So it's important to get that information on the table, especially with your best clients, so that they know what's going on. So you don't surprise them and say, well, I'm selling the business next month, and this is who's buying it. You want to talk to them in advance. If they're good clients, they will sit and listen to you for your plans.
And you really can't wait till the due diligence phase, because the buyer is going to want to know that they've got reliable clients in the business. So that's something you have to work during the course of the process.
I know, and particularly in my business, they wanted a review of all the clients we had and had a request to talk to some people with me, in conjunction with me, so that we could talk with my client and the potential buyer to see if there was a good marriage. But that's the key to your business, are your clients. And you want to make sure the situation is such that you don't lose them when that sale occurs, because that, number one, will be a deal breaker for the buyer, and it'll diminish the total value of your business. So you have to make sure that everyone understands that this is what's going to happen, and will it upset them and concern them, and what do they need to know?
One other question that came in, Bob, you mentioned doing evaluation. Do you have any advice on how to do evaluation on a service-based business beyond placing a value on the relationships owners have with existing clients?
Well, I think it's really looking at cash flow. What's the cash flow in the business minus what's being paid out to you? That's probably the best way to determine a value going forward. In my business, we looked at 1.5 times gross income. And in some cases, it's 5 times net income. But they're looking for what's the cash flow to the business, and working with your advisors, your CPA, to determine if in fact you weren't there, what would be the gross cash flow to that business over time, as opposed to taking out your salary or your key salary over that time. So what is the cash flow going to look like to them, and how will they benefit from it? That's probably one of the best ways that you can do that study. And of course, net worth is important, but net worth is not as important as cash flow. Yes, any others?
Yeah, you mentioned that businesses will trade as a multiple of cash flow. Are there standard multiples? Do people need to think about hiring somebody to do evaluation?
Well, there are standard cash flow projections in various businesses. I know in my business, there are a few organizations that specialize in putting together sales, and you can find out fairly quickly what they expect to create in terms of what's the cash flow that they expect to create a certain value. In the financial planning business, it's either a function of gross cash flow or net cash flow after expenses. It's one of those two. And in most cases, it's 2.5 times gross cash flow or 5 times net cash flow. And that's a pretty standard number in the industry. So you want to find out perhaps from your own CPA as to what other businesses in this field are looking for in terms of cash flow projections, and what do you need to produce to be able to meet their goals.
There are also companies that do valuation services for
Absolutely
businesses beyond, and that's a specialty beyond what your own CPA may be in a position to do for you.
Absolutely. There are firms that you can find that deal specifically with valuations. And sometimes if you work with a business broker can connect you with valuation services to accomplish those results. In many cases, a business broker can help you find the right marketplace for your business and help you find the organization that can do the valuations. Those are a big help because they work specifically with firms like yours to create whatever is the value.
Okay, are there any other questions from participants in the webinar? Bob, do you recommend that people actually engage a valuation service?
It depends upon the position they're in now. Are they close to actually making the decision to sell? And if they are, it's then important to do evaluation. But when they're in the very first stages of determining what their goals are and when they want to get out of the business, that's a little bit early to do the valuation. But if you get to stage 3, where you want to start to identify the potential buyers, you need to get that valuation done because they're not going to talk to you until that work is done. They want to know what the numbers are, but you want to make sure that they sign an agreement that they won't share that information with anyone else. Because the worst thing that can happen is you share information with a potential buyer and they tell everyone else about it. So they have to have an agreement not to reveal that to any other firm in addition to their own, so that it's protected, because those are very important numbers for you and numbers for you to protect yourself.
And how do you get what is called, I guess it's called a non-disclosure agreement? You have to get your attorney to draft one for you?
Yeah, generally it can be done through the business broker that you work with or your own attorney that will draft an agreement for your potential buyer to sign, to agree not to share that information with anyone else, that it's closely guarded. It's very important information, and you can't allow them to share with anyone else because that would just kill the whole sale.
A question, could you touch on some exit for legacy business? Is something to look more specifically at other businesses?
Well, by legacy business, you mean passing it on to family members?
I'm assuming that's right, Bob, but I'll
Right.
ask the person who posed the question to clarify that for us. Yes, that is correct.
Okay, well, there are a few different ways. Number one is, and again, this is for a longer term approach, is to give stock to them over a period of time. That's step number one. Step number two is to create what's called a family partnership. And I did this with one client that owned a hotel, created a partnership for himself, his wife, and his three children. And the value of the business was placed in this family partnership. And he and his wife owned 90% of the shares, but over time, they transferred those shares to their children as part of the family partnership. And it was a way to make that transition over time successfully. So that's a way that I found was very interesting in creating a legacy plan for your business. And of course, the last option is finding out what your family's financial needs are, and then creating an agreement with them that you will sell the business to them and take back a note. Certainly, you want to make sure that your family members are safe to invest with. But if you can feel comfortable with them, you can create a situation where you can create income for yourself of 5 to 7%. if you are taking back a note and they're buying the business from you. It's a way to guarantee cash flow for a period of time to help you out. And if you trust your family members, it's a great way to move forward. But you want to make sure, of course, that you trust either your children or their families to be able to work with you, that they don't have any financial problems of their own that can undermine that relationship.
Another question, Bob. This person has a business that is located on her home property, looking to sell the brand, but not the property. The deal would need to include the buyer producing on her land, but packing elsewhere. Have you seen this type of arrangement before?
No. Well, there are situations I found where, let's say, a business owns the property that it has its has business on. Let's say I ran into a dental practice that wanted to be sold, but the seller wanted to retain the ownership of the building and sold the practice to someone else with the understanding that they would pay rent to him or her while they were in that business. So it's a way to separate out the value of the property and the value of the business. And you want to make sure that it works for them to work with you and pay income to the owner based upon the value of that real estate.
Well, here, I don't think they're buying the real estate. I think what's happening here is that the buyer is actually going to not buy the real estate, but is instead going to buy the brand and be producing on the land that is going to be retained by the owner. So it sounds to me like in this particular circumstance, you're going to have to end up with a lease between the homeowner and the buyer, for the buyer to be able to use that property.
Exactly, because they can't use it for free because it's your property. But you're exactly right. It should be a lease arrangement that they lease the land from you in order to create their business. And that's a great way to provide ongoing income to a seller, is to lease the property separately from the business itself. It's a way that you can produce income for yourself for a long period of time without having the risk of the business itself. I think and I've seen that happen with medical practices in many cases, dental practices, where they retain the ownership of the property and they sell the practice.
Now, presumably, if there was no rent in the business before, establishing that rent on a going forward basis will decrease the value that you'll get for the sale of the business.
Right.
Because it's an expense that didn't exist before.
You mean decrease the value for the seller, what you're saying? Or for the buyer?
It'll decrease the value of the business for the seller because it's an expense that you're creating that didn't exist before.
So to mean the expense is the lease arrangement with the buyer, is that right?
Right.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yep.
Well, there certainly would be an income source. It may decrease the overall value of the business, but if you're getting ongoing income and a lease arrangement for the property that the business is on, that's certainly worthwhile, and it's a low risk form of income.
Sure, because you're always on the land anyway.
Yeah, as opposed to the risk of the business itself, which is a separate entity. But doing that as a lease arrangement, in many cases, works out very well.
How would somebody prepare an exit plan if they own a small but significant percentage of a business, but is not the primary principal?
Very good question. That's very hard to do. You have to have an arrangement with the primary principal, or it's not going to work. You can't just go out and sell your interest in a business without consulting with the primary shareholder. Why not sell it back to the primary shareholder and you can't just sell your share of the business without the primary shareholder understanding and knowing what you're doing, because it's certainly going to affect them and their cash flow. So go back to the seller and say, here's what I want to do. Will you be interested in buying back my interests?
And oftentimes in those kinds of circumstances, there may be an existing shareholders agreement, which gives you certain rights to
Right.
to sell.
We give you certain rights and also require you to get the approval of the primary shareholder before you do sell, and the price that you sell it at. That's oftentimes part of the agreement that you have to agree, so that you just cannot sell it to anyone at whatever price you want. You have to get the approval of the primary shareholder and at a share price that works for everyone. But you need to get that agreement in place. There has to be an agreement with you if you want to sell your interests in a particular business that you're not the primary shareholder. You need to have that agreement in place.
Have you found that adding the concern of leasing or renting the property without selling the building reduces potential buyers?
No, because what it does is, for many businesses who can't afford to buy the real estate, it gives them the opportunity to purchase the business without having to purchase the real estate. So it reduces the overall cost of the business, and at the same time is a win-win for the seller, because they retain that lease arrangement and retain the income from that lease. So it's a win-win for buyer and seller, in that the buyer doesn't have to purchase the property, which can inflate the value significantly depending upon what the value of that real estate is. They just purchase that ongoing business and lease back the property from the seller.
If you think about it, it's basically additional financing for the purchase of the business.
Right. It's a separate entity that can be separated from the practice of the business itself, that's designed to produce ongoing income for whomever owns the real estate. And in many cases, it's happened as I mentioned, in medical practices and dental practices, that the older participant is willing to sell their practice, but does not want to sell the underlying real estate, because they feel they've got ongoing value there that can produce income for them for a period of time. And it also helps the buyer, because they don't have to buy the real estate as well. So they both benefit from that.
Okay, do we have any further questions from anybody in the audience? I don't see any. Bob, thank you very much. I think this has been very helpful. On a going forward basis, if people have follow-up questions, they can feel free to email either me, that's jim.danhauser@scorevolunteer.org, or Bob, whose email address was in the presentation. Again, I will
Right.
be sending out a link to the recording, and we thank everybody for their attention, and we will see you at the next one. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, folks, and thank you, Jim. Enjoyed talking to you.